立法會
The President. This Council resumes the second reading debate on the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024. Mr. Kisson-Young, Chairman of the Bills Committee on the bill, will first address the Council on the committee's report. Mr. Kisson-Young, President, in the capacity of the Chairperson of the Bills Committee on Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024, I now report to the Council the salient points of the committee's deliberation. The bill seeks to amend the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance to strengthen the powers of the Director of Food and Environmental Hygiene and authorized officers for dealing with certain environmental hygiene problems, introduce an offence targeting unlawful shop-front extension, increase the penalties for certain offences relating to environmental hygiene, and miscellaneous amendments to Cap 132 and related legislation. The Bills Committee has held 4 meetings and invited submissions from the public. Members generally support the proposed amendments and have had an in-depth discussion with the administration on issues like the handling of public health nuisances, strategies to tackle obstruction to scavenging operations and unlawful shop-front extension, notices facilitating investigation by government personnel and the subsequent actions, and the removal of vermin from infested premises, as well as recovery of expenses. Members have urged the administration to tackle water seepage in buildings and water dripping from air conditioners with technology. The administration has advised that it will make use of microwave tomography or infrared thermography progressively in a number of districts to expeditiously diagnose the cause of seepage. The FEHD have been using devices such as digital cameras and high-definition telescopes to facilitate long-range observation during night time or under poor lighting environments for identifying dripping air conditioners. The bill will help facilitate the premises concerned to expeditiously cooperate with the governments in conducting investigation so that public health nuisances can be addressed as soon as possible. Members have indicated that under the existing legislation, various government departments and property management agents are unable to effectively deal with the problem of garbage apartments. They have inquired whether the bill will enhance the efficiency in tackling garbage apartments. The administration has advised that if a garbage apartment causes environmental hygiene nuisance, the FEHD will conduct an on-site inspection. As many cases involve people in need of assistance, such as the elderly people or people with mental health problems, they are usually handled sensitively through interdepartmental collaboration on a compassionate basis. Members have noted that a notice of intended entry may be issued to an owner or occupier of premises or the household to facilitate investigation of the source of the public nuisance. Members have suggested that the administration should require the household to comply with the relevant demand of admission to the premises within 14 days after the issuance of a notice of intended entry, so as to avoid deliberate delay by the household concerned. The administration agrees with the view. Members have inquired about the circumstances under which the administration will conduct vermin disinvestation work for infested private premises and be able to recover the relevant expenses incurred from the households or persons responsible for the management of the premises concerned, even without serving a prior vermin notice. The administration has advised that, generally speaking, the FEHD will issue a vermin notice to require the household of the verminous premises to take action to destroy and remove vermin on their premises within a specified period. Non-compliance constitutes an offence. If the FEHD considers that the situation warrants immediate intervention, it may take actions without serving a vermin notice. The bill proposes that the FEHD may recover the expenses incurred as a civil debt from the owners or occupiers of the premises concerned, so as to prevent them from regarding it as a free service. Members have suggested that the administration should refer to the definition of manager under the Building Management Ordinance and refine the bill's drafting to clearly reflect that the authority may recover from the owner's corporation any expenses incurred in executing or causing to be executed work to destroy and remove vermin. In response to this view, the administration will move an amendment to specify that the authority may recover any expenses incurred in destroying and removing vermin from the owner's corporation on which a notice of elimination of vermin is served. On occupation of public places by miscellaneous articles causing obstruction to scavenging operation, members have urged the authorities to effectively deal with street obstructions caused by scavengers and mitigate the conflict between frontline staff and scavengers. The administration has advised that if relevant articles cause obstruction to scavenging operation, the usual first step the FEHD will take is to advise and to provide guidance to scavengers as appropriate. If the situation does not improve, the department may consider serving a notice to remove obstruction to scavengers, requiring them to remove the articles within specified time and prevent such articles from causing obstruction again within the period and area as specified. Otherwise, the articles will be removed. Depending on the circumstances of the case, the FEHD may also consider prosecuting the relevant persons for obstruction to scavenging operation. The bill proposes to empower the Director of Food and Environmental Hygiene to immediately dispose of perishable articles seized and pay the claimant the amount as a compensation. Members have expressed concern about the possible abuse of the proposed mechanism for lodging claims. In response to members' views, the administration will move an amendment to the effect that if an article removed, seized, or detained by the authority is of a perishable nature, the owner of the article may, within 48 hours after the article is removed, seized, or detained, make a claim for its return. If no claim is made for the article, the authority may be forfeited to the government. In response to other views from members and the legal advisor, amendments will be moved to improve the drafting of the bill. The Bills Committee supports the amendments. President, the following is my personal views on the bill. Water seepages from buildings, air conditioner dripping, proliferation of vermin and shopping extension, these are deep-rooted issues in community. Now, 2 years ago, since the amendment bill was passed on fixed penalty, public cleanliness and obstruction, the second phase review has been conducted. The government introduced this bill to enhance environmental hygiene and improve cityscape. I support the move. Frankly speaking, according to my 20 years experience in the community, this bill will help addressing the above deep-rooted issues. However, we still need to work harder. For example, water seepage, air conditioner dripping, and garbage apartments. The bill will extend the hours where an authorized officer can enter the premises for investigation to nighttime. Plus the offense, it will have a deterrent effect and it will speed up investigation. However, in reality, there are still many challenges that the authorities may face. For example, water seepage. Now, the Joint Office has set the standard for water seepage at 35% of humidity. That is too high a threshold. And there's also room for improvements in terms of investigation. Now, the second phase investigation is now being conducted simultaneously with phase 3 investigation. And for phase 3, technologies like microwave tomography and infrared thermography are introduced. Now, I hope the government will further extend the simultaneous arrangements to more districts and extend the use of these new technologies to over the territory. Now, the Joint Office has defined water seepage in buildings as a public issue. Now, for some cases that I've handled, there were cases where the Joint Office refused to handle these cases because the humidity level has not been reached. Now, the authority should consider lowering the threshold for humidity to cover more cases. Now, there are many cases which are agreed with each other. That's why they are taking the case to courts. The authority should help address these disputes and prevent these cases from going to court. Now, for air conditioner dripping, for older buildings, there is no external drainage pipe for air conditioner. For subdivided units, in some cases, there are no windows, and the units are too small. As a result, the landlords do not have the incentive to address these issues. Now, we need to address these issues to avoid eviction. Now, for garbage apartments, I've received many complaints from my constituencies. The household in garbage apartments are usually mentally or emotionally troubled, and some have the hoarding habit. Now, the bill will only facilitate the clearance of garbage by the authority, but there are usually a lot of obstructions. Now, for a case I've been handling, the household in concern is a 50-year-old lady. Now, the building department needs to gain entry into the house for maintenance. However, that is a garbage apartment. The garbages in the house had to be removed, and it caused proliferation of vermin in the corridor. It led to a lot of complaints. Now, on the day of moving the miscellaneous items and garbages, the lady was agitated, and in the end, the police had to be brought. It shows the importance of interdepartmental collaboration. The deep-rooted issue is preventing a relapse of the household. Otherwise, the garbage situation will return. President, concerning short-term extension, since the first phase amendments, the fixed penalty has been raised from $5,000 to $6,000. There was immediate effect. The number of complaints received has been reduced by 30%, and fixed penalty notices has dropped by 90%. There is a significant improvement in the situation. However, some courier companies are still using a large area on the pavements for packaging and loading. The bill allows the FEHD to prosecute the lawbreaker with recorded images. Now, we should install more CCTVs at black spots or make reference to the technologies used by the mainland to help law enforcement. Now, the situation persists. We need to consider revoking the business license of these shops. Now, the period during which the claim notice will be posted on the article is 30 minutes. Now, flexible arrangements will be implemented to facilitate loading and unloading operations during festive holidays. Now, also, there is a claiming mechanism for the seized goods. There are worries that the system would be abused. In the end, the government may have to pay these claimants with public money. Now, I'm pleased that in the CSA, the government is going to move. The loophole will be plugged. Improving environmental hygiene is an important issue. Now, more technologies will be introduced to eliminate vermin, address mosquito issues, and penalize those who feed feral pigeons with a more hefty fine. I recognize the efforts made by the government. I also recognize the efforts made by the Secretary for Environment and Ecology and his team. Now, let's work together to continue improving the environment in Hong Kong. I so submit I support the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024.
Mr. Lam Chen Sing. Thank you, President. We're now discussing the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024. Apart from additional offences and raising penalties for these offences, such as obstruction to scavenging operations, etc., law enforcement can also be more effective in relation to public nuisance and street obstruction. At the moment, for shopfront extension, the operators will be issued a fixed penalty tickets and also be prosecuted under the Summary Offences Ordinance. However, the FEHD still relies on the police in order to request the articles to be removed. The amendment will allow the FEHD to exercise its power independently. As for the obstruction to scavenging operations, the time frame for removing articles will be shortened from 4 hours to not less than 30 minutes. And as a result, FEHD officers will be able to remove articles of obstruction more effectively. According to the department, for loading and unloading of goods, these are transient activities and generally they will not be the subject of prosecution. Having said that, since the bill will provide a shorter time frame for articles to be removed by the FEHD, the public will have high expectations on the law enforcement result of the FEHD so as to address the issue of street obstruction. Now, whenever goods are found on the street or cardboards collected by scavengers are found, a complaint could be made to the FEHD immediately, and that this could cause increased conflict between members of the public as well as FEHD officers. The department should explain the policy adequately to members of the public. Although the time frame is not less than 30 minutes, the law doesn't go after goods placed on the roadside for loading and unloading. It targets articles that cause street obstruction. So we need to make sure that this is well explained in order to prevent abuse. Now, at the moment, frontline officers are equipped with 1,600 body-worn cameras. This will provide evidence only when some incidents have occurred. In fact, when law enforcement action is taken against shops in crowded areas, possibly black spots, there may still be conflicts. If necessary, the FEHD officers can still ask the police for help, although the FEHD can now act independently. I think that the FEHD patrol officers will work as a team, but since the civil service will be trimmed, we should make sure that the sufficient officers will be recruited to ensure effective implementation of the law. I'm also concerned about recycling industry and the scavengers. Now, very often they collect the cardboard boxes and then they put them on the cart. The carts will be put on the roadside, and this could be the subject of complaint. They may just be taking a short break. They go away for a while for a meal or for a break, and yet if they are complained, if they are the subject of complaint, then this will add to the plight of them. Now, according to the latest audit report, the Director of Audit checked a number of hotspots of complaints in the street, and it is found that the FEHD have not removed the relevant notices. According to the department's explanation, these are areas where the scavengers would temporarily put the items that they have collected there. The department takes a flexible approach. That means the officers will proactively advise these scavengers to move their belongings to somewhere else, which less crowded. However, in the face of complaints, frontline officers will have to deal with the matter and proceed to prosecution. Now, we have so many problems that cannot be tackled by the FEHD alone. The EEB is the policy bureau in charge of waste reduction and recycling. I think this is good opportunity for the bureau to consider the role of scavengers in the recycling chain, and that suitable support should be provided. The Ombudsman also conducted a direct investigation on street obstruction and shopfront extension. According to the 2023 Ombudsman report, most cases prosecuted by the FEHD are actually committed by repeated offenders. For example, each offender committed the crime 7.5 times between 2018 and 2021. I fully agree with the Ombudsman's recommendation and that a progressive penalty system should be introduced. According to the audit report, unlawful display of bills or posters and the recidivism rate is very serious. There are the top 5 offenders receiving fixed penalty tickets, and yet the FEHD has failed to prosecute them because the frontline officers are not equipped with any electronic system to find out if they are repeated offenders. My suggestion is for law enforcement officers to be equipped with electronic devices so that they can check the penalty records of the relevant offenders. Now, if need be, the Ombudsman's recommendation should be considered and that the progressive penalty system should be introduced. The penalties should be raised. I fully support the bill. Ms. Starry. President, I speak in support of the bill. This term of government, under the leadership of the Chief Executive, Chief Secretary for Administration, and the Bureau Chiefs, have made tremendous efforts in tackling livelihood issues, especially long-standing and tricky problems such as public hygiene. I recall that at the start of this term of government, the DAB had a meeting with the government officials, and we also mentioned, apart from economic development, that livelihood issues and deep-rooted problems should be tackled. The Chief Secretary for Administration set up a working group to tackle a number of issues such as hygiene black spots. Now, we have had some legislative amendments, and together with this bill, penalties have been raised, and since then we've seen progress in tackling some of the major issues such as the feeding of wild pigeons and tackling hygiene black spots. However, we need to keep ourselves abreast with the times, and that means we should conduct timely reviews of the legislation and see whether we can meet public expectation. Take shopfront extension or street obstruction as an example. I've been a district councillor for over 20 years, and I've spent so much time on tackling the issue, and I fully appreciate the joint operations mounted by the police, FEHD, and other government departments. Now, as the Secretary must be aware, this issue is actually related to a number of other issues, and I'm happy to learn that there is now a more effective approach to tackling the matter. Now, as a district councillor, I also listen to the views of residents. Some residents have really high standards. They can't accept even the most minor case of street obstruction. On the other hand, I've also heard the plights of shop operators. The economy isn't doing very well, and they would like to just put the goods a little bit outside of the shop boundaries in order to do more business. So it's a difficult balancing exercise. I understand the difficulties facing frontline officers. We need clear rules for them to take action on, so they face a lot of pressure. At the same time, we also need to consider local circumstances. A balance must be struck, or the economy may be affected, and that the action may not be the most effective way in ensuring street cleanliness. So I'm sure that this is a balancing exercise, and we should consider not only the laws but also the people, and I think that district councils do have a role to play. Of course, there are different characteristics in different districts. After introducing a blanket law For districts with special characteristics, we should also give some leeway. For frontline officers, again, I fully appreciate the difficulties facing them. Secretary, you should mull over how they can be better equipped with the powers so as to take enforcement action more effectively. Now, like Mr. Lam Chun Sing said, I think that the body-worn cameras may cause conflicts. I know that frontline officers are subject to a lot of pressure because of the media, district councillors, and the public. And I think your colleagues, of course, feel the heat, because if we take a hard-handed approach against scavengers, this could be seen as bullying. But at the same time, we need to take enforcement action in order to meet public expectation. So I think the Secretary should fully consider other supporting measures. So my point is that we need to strike a reasonable balance. Yesterday we discussed another bill. A broad brush approach could be problematic. I hope that the government could exercise compassion before law enforcement. This is an administrative-led government. I hope that you give it a thought. It's your responsibility. The administration, meanwhile, should continue to tackle other long-standing difficult problems. It is opportune for you to consider further what can be done. Well, like I said, Secretary, I fully appreciate your work. There is a lot on your plate, and I fully appreciate your efforts in drawing up an amendment bill in order to tackle these problems. Not until this term of government have these issues been fully considered. The other point is about water seepage. As mentioned by the other member, we've seen progress. The government is committed to tackle the issue and tackle the issue at source. Now, I can tell you, Secretary, that at the moment we still have a huge backlog here. The sources of water seepage cannot be identified, and things have dragged on for too long. It's really eyesore to see what happens in some of the flats. These elderly owners do not have money to go after the perpetrator. They need to rely on the government, and yet, as mentioned by Mr. Lam just now, if the moisture content is a threshold is not reached, no action will be taken. So I think mediation is one way out. We can also introduce new technologies such as infrared or microwave. There must be a state-of-the-art technology that those with means could use. This is a problem facing not only grassroots but also the middle class. The other point is about garbage apartment. Like Mr. Yang said, it would be easier to tackle garbage apartments in public housing estates. For private residential buildings, this is an endless wait for the FEHD to step in. It's really problematic for those living near the garbage apartment. Even when you ask a district councillor for help, no action will be taken. This really affects residents living nearby. The government should step in a timely manner. For public housing estates, well, I think that the PRH tenants are lucky. For private buildings, however, people are concerned about health, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic, and garbage apartments would seriously affect the health of their neighbors. The other point is about street sleepers. Well, I think that the situation has deteriorated. This bill could offer some way out for them, but I think that this is, after all, a long-standing issue in Hong Kong. A scientific research should be conducted. More help should be given to street sleepers. In fact, when I was in Singapore, I asked about the absence of street sleepers. How did they deal with the issue of street sleepers? And according to my friends in Singapore, the cases will be tackled in a serious manner. That means the family members of the street sleepers would be approached, and that they would be enlisted to help convince the street sleepers to go off the street. So I think that the family members should also bear this responsibility. In Hong Kong, I know that it is a thorny issue. You don't want to be perceived as a bully, but at the same time, it's a public health issue, public hygiene issue. When street sleepers occupy subways or footbridges for a long time, the same as scavengers, as mentioned by Mr. Lam Chun Sing, why are they entitled to put cardboard boxes at particular spots in the streets on a regular basis? So of course we should protect the underprivileged. But according to my observation, some street sleepers are actually property owners. They just choose to live on streets.
Mr. Scott Leung. Thank you, President. Environmental hygiene is closely related to our life. Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024 seeks to enhance environmental hygiene management to deal with deep-rooted issues, for example, water seepage in buildings, water dripping from air conditioners, garbage apartments, and shopping extension. Now, with our in-depth discussion, the administration has accepted members' suggestions and amendments will be moved. I thank the Secretary for leading a team which is receptive to our suggestions. Concerning water seepage in buildings and air conditioner dripping, in my experience, many old buildings lack a common drainage pipe for air conditioners. Water dripping from air conditioners has troubled many households. Now, because of the scattered ownership and modification to flats, it is very difficult to identify the source of the dripping household. Now, with the technology, the FEHD has become much more effective in identifying water seepage and air dripping. If necessary, access can be gained for investigation. It will help addressing the issue. But the government has to ensure that the procedures for gaining entry into the premises is transparent. Now, for verminous premises and proliferation of vermin, the FEHD can issue a notice for the notice of elimination of vermin to the OC or the owners of the household, but the government need to set up a guideline on conditions which will trigger the issuance of notice. Now, for garbage apartments, many of the households are people in need, for example, elderly people or mentally troubled people. So we need to provide them with help at the same time. Garbage apartments are immense nuisances to residents in the same building. So the FEHD needs to strike a balance in law enforcement, and more importantly, there must be an interdepartmental collaborative mechanism combining counseling, assistance, and enforcement of law. Now, for shopping extension, the original proposal is to allow the FEHD to immediately dispose of unclaimed articles, even for articles with higher value. Now, during the deliberation of the bill, when I myself and members heard the doubts from the trade, we conveyed the same to the government. Having listened to our views, the administration enhanced the bill to amend the mechanism for disposing seized articles. And under the new proposal, perishable article will be kept for 48 hours. For non-perishable articles, they will be kept for 7 days in case of claims. Now, this will address the concerns of the shops while ensuring law enforcement. But again, clear guidelines must be implemented so as to avoid disputes. Now, authorized officers are also empowered with discretionary power to allow the articles to remain for more than 30 minutes. This is a human-centric approach. It will facilitate loading and unloading operations on street. Now, in the past, there were many disputes between frontline staff of the government and the shop owners. So after the passage of the bill, the government must continue to communicate with shop owners while stepping up training for FEHD frontline staff to avoid misunderstanding during law enforcement. Public health and environmental hygiene management is close to people's hearts. In enforcing the law, a balance must be struck between compassion and efficiency. Now, we need to drive high awareness for environmental hygiene. Let's make Hong Kong cleaner. Now, I support the amendments bill as well as the CSA to be moved by the government. I so submit. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, President. I support the amendments bill. Now, there are all sorts of proposals in the bill. I've never seen such a wide-ranging bill. It covers water seepage, water dripping from air conditioners to shorefront extension. Every single one of them concerns deep-rooted issues, for example, air dripping from air conditioners and garbage apartments. Now, having heard what my predecessors said, when I was a kid, when I was 5 years old, I was a hawker for one day. Now, after moving on land, my family was engaged in the business of recycling. So in front of a building, we laid before us a canvas and we placed miscellaneous articles for sale. And I was told by my parents that we need to pack up the things swiftly when the hawkers team came. There was a time when many people in Hong Kong were trying to make a living with just any methods. And time has changed. Aspiration has changed as well. The FEHD is also considerate because if we enforce the law too strictly, we may create a whole series of other problems. For example, mental health issues and also exacerbating poverty for certain families. Still, we need to tackle these problems. Now, these squeakiest will get the most oil. Mr. Peter Shield and I are both concerned about shorefront extension. Now, there was a time when shops were allowed to place the products on the pavements for sale, but there were some unruly people who bully others and place the products way out on the pavement. Peter Shield and I advised those shop owners to be more considerate. So I think the bill will help addressing the most extreme cases. I think that's also the policy intent of the bill. We don't want to affect the ordinary, law-abiding people. As mentioned by Dr. Starry Lee, we need to strike a balance between compassion and law enforcement. Now, laws may change according to changes in society and times. If the laws are too draconian, it will be bad for society. So when we legislate, we should seek to address the most extreme cases while empowering the frontline staff with discretionary power. Now, law is like rules in the game. Now, in the past, you will have 4 hours to remove the articles before they are seized. Now, the time is shortened to 30 minutes. Now, when we were deliberating over the bill, if the article is seized or so-called given custody to the government for perishable food, they would be disposed of immediately. However, if there are, say, iPhones, they will be preserved by the government. Now, some members ask, what about abalone being prepared for sale? Would they be confiscated? Now, the penalty level is $6,000 for shuffling extension. Now, sometimes fishermen would prepare the fish for sale on the pavement, so those items are not valuable. However, it would come with a high cost for the FHD to preserve these perishable food. Now, having listened to our views, the government is lengthening the preservation period to 48 hours for perishable food. But to be honest, you're not going to put the fish into cold storage. So let's look at the situation. Are there many people who are claiming back their perishable items? If not, you can change the rules. I will also talk to my constituency to see how we can make it work for both parties. And finally, people do this because they have no choice, and sometimes the FEHD has been enforcing the law too inflexibly. I always complain about the lack of unloading areas in wet markets. There are only 2 parking spaces. Now, for fish stores, they need to keep the fish with seawater, so it takes them much longer to unload their products. So 15 minutes are nowhere sufficient. It takes already 5 minutes to park the truck and another 20 to 30 minutes to unload the fish from the truck. Sometimes the FEHD would be issuing a fixed penalty notice while the unloading operation is ongoing. Now, of course, it would make the shop owners and the drivers angry, and there are often disputes. Hard words are used on both sides. If a softer approach can be adopted, it would be much better. So the bill is just a step forward. You need to provide sufficient unloading areas for trucks. As I said in another meeting, the Kutong North wet markets will only have 5 parking spaces for trucks. That is nowhere near enough. So we need to enhance the planning standards and be reasonable. Now, for those unreasonable standards, you need to change them because we want to reform ourselves. Now, for the way forward, as mentioned by one of my predecessors, every business calculates their cost. If the system is, well, the market is open to everyone, that's the reality, but you can only survive in the market if you can meet the cost. Now, I have a friend who runs a very small shop. The parcels are placed in front of the shop. The pavement is just narrow, but the parcel is being placed in front of the shop. The penalty would be considered part of the operation cost only. Now, we need the courier business in Hong Kong, otherwise we can't compete with our neighbors. So we need to consider the economic side of the situation as well. You need to give them space to put their stuff. And finally, about catering business. Before the restaurants opens, there are usually a pallet of goods placed in front of the shop. That's how things works in the past. Now the styrofoam boxes are not cheap. It costs $3 each. Now, even though the fine will be $6,000, some operators will be willing to pay the fine. So I support the amendments bill, but you need to work harder.
Mr. Tong Ni-Tse. Thank you, President. Bread and butter issues are very important. Today we are talking about the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024. We are talking about 7 environmental hygiene issues, say water seepage in buildings, water dripping from air conditioners, garbage, apartments, proliferation of vermin, occupation of public places by miscellaneous articles, causing obstruction to scavenging operations, unlawful shopfront extension, SFE, as well as illegal display or affixation of bills or posters. These are not trivial matters, but then they are plaguing a lot of people in Hong Kong. They affect mental health of people in Hong Kong. It is necessary that the government should adopt a more proactive approach to minimize the negative feelings of Hong Kong people in order to enhance the sense of well-being. The bill seeks to increase penalties in order to enhance deterrent effect, but in the end, will it be able to meet public aspirations? It hinges on the mindset of frontline law enforcement officers. They need to address the pressing needs of the public. They need to take bold moves. They shouldn't shy away from taking law enforcement actions. Combating the abuse of public housing is actually one of the examples. It doesn't concern legislative amendments. It's all about using existing power of the administration. As long as the administration has resolved, we will see results. Combating hygiene black spots in another example. There are many complaints about hygiene black spots, but then we haven't yet seen the government tackling the problem. The current term government is determined to solve livelihood issues, led by the Deputy Chief Secretary for Administration. A task force is aimed at tackling these livelihood issues. There are a total of 700 or so hygiene black spots. Now the number has been reduced to about 100. The result has been very significant. Some original hygiene black spots should be improved. For example, some design characteristics should be introduced, and technologies should also be leveraged in order to prevent any occupation of public places by miscellaneous articles. We should also improve cityscape. Regarding water seepage in buildings and water dripping from air conditioners, many members of the public think that the government hasn't yet solved the problem in a long time. Many back alleys have the problem of water seepage in buildings as well as water dripping from air conditioners. Some members of the public have already grown used to these problems, and this is probably why the administration isn't determined to solve these problems. The bill empowers public officers to gain entry into premises in order to conduct investigation, and the permissible hours of the entry of premises for investigation will be extended from 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. If public officers simply knock on the door and go through the motion, I believe even if you allow public officers to enter the premises round the clock, the problem won't be solved. I'm not an on-duty legislator every day. I don't get in touch with members of the public every day. Some officers of the Joint Office for Investigation of Water Seepage Complaints follow up on water seepage complaints very actively. But it takes a very long time to handle one single case. There's a lot of dissatisfaction when it comes to this. The Joint Office has a funding of $300 million. This figure is not on the high side, but members of the public think that it's not good value for money. I suggest the use of more advanced technologies in order to identify the source of water seepage. Owners should be encouraged or urged to solve the problem at source. The bill talks about a lot of penalties for offenses in relation to environmental hygiene, but at the end of the day, the administration needs to be proactive in tackling these crimes. If the administration thinks that the court penalties aren't sufficient enough, the administration should lodge appeal. Apart from the mentality of public officers, the administration should adopt a two-pronged approach and make good use of resources, say INT. Artificial intelligence and cameras are used to identify objects being dropped from height. This will save manpower demand as well as reduce disputes. The FEHD also installs cameras in black spots. Coupled with the help of AI, I believe there will be greater results. In the consultation exercise, there were some suggestions in relation to the use of cameras, but there were objections. Reasons such as too stringent law enforcement as well as invasion of privacy were put forward. But I believe privacy doesn't come into play. We need to set a reasonable period of time for shops to load and unload goods in a legal manner. Appeals could be lodged by members of the public and they don't necessarily have to appear in court. There are always more solutions than problems. The key is that the administration needs to have resolve. Professional property management companies should also be engaged. Occupation of public places by miscellaneous articles. In such cases, it's not necessarily public officers of the government that attend the scene. Sometimes it may be staff members of the property management companies who attended the scene. I'm a founding president of an association as well as CPMSA. We're moving towards the direction of digitalization and going smart. Fire safety is one of the examples. Caring for the elderly, environmental hygiene issues, property management companies can play a bigger part in these issues. There's a lack of support for the industry, so we cannot make full use of their resources and professionalism. we should attach more importance to property management companies and enhance liaison with them. Together, we will improve the environmental hygiene issues and tackle issues plaguing the people in Hong Kong. I support the second reading, third reading, as well as all amendments of the bill. Thank you, President. Ms. Jofi Chen. Thank you, President. I'm not a member of the Bills Committee, but this issue is close to my heart. On behalf of the FTU, I express support for the bill. This bill seeks to increase the deterrent effect by raising penalty levels in order to better address environmental hygiene issues. Through public education, we will be able to improve environmental hygiene. These legislative amendments not only answer demands of the public to improve livelihood as well as environmental hygiene, it also shows the fact that the government is pragmatic. I hope the government will improve the policies on three fronts that will ensure the sustainability of the policies. There are some 2,170 hawker control officers in Hong Kong. More frontline officers will have to be deployed for inspection and investigation, say water seepage, water dripping, shopfront extension, as well as occupation of public places by miscellaneous articles. It is necessary to take law enforcement actions. The police force is oftentimes mobilized in order to tackle these problems. Wet market management, scavenging operations, all these will lead to an increase in manpower. So we do need to have mobile record device in order to ease the burden of frontline officers so that their quality or service quality won't be compromised. I go along with what Mr. Tung Nite said. In public places, privacy shouldn't be a factor at play. We need to leverage on technology to tackle these issues. The government should also evaluate the stress index of frontline officers. Task forces or task groups should be set up in order to tackle the issue of garbage apartments. There's a lack of uniform standard in this regard. Through efficient division of work, the burden and the stress of frontline officers should be eased. Emotional support should be provided to frontline officers that will enhance the sense of well-being of them. The government should also provide guidelines and code of practices. Street sweepers should be set apart from scavengers. The period to clear occupation of public places by miscellaneous articles is shortened from 4 hours to 30 minutes. But then oftentimes people ask about the difference between a scavenger and a street sweeper. But I have to say that scavengers usually collect recyclables in order to make a living. Most of them are grassrooters and elderly people. They hoard miscellaneous articles, and this will lead to environmental hygiene issues. Street sweepers require the collaboration of different departments. When it comes to law enforcement, they should be treated equally, but then these two should be differentiated. In addition to law enforcement, recycling should be supported. Recycling spots should be set up to incentivize scavengers to recycle what they have collected. In relation to garbage apartments and occupation of public places, there should be clear exemptions, say through the district offices as well as district councils. More publicity should be mounted in order to have a consistent law enforcement standards in order to avoid disputes. The period of handling shopfront extension and garbage apartments are aligned to be less than 30 minutes. Some people are worried about possible impacts on the business environment. In order to allay the concerns of the industry, a platform should be set up. Training should also be provided. Across different districts, law enforcement statistics should be provided to headquarters. That will ensure the transparency of law enforcement. And this will also ensure the consistency of different policies. The FTU supports the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024, but we have to underscore the key is the implementation details. I hope the administration will make proper arrangements in relation to frontline manpower and support for frontline officers. Guidelines should be clear. There should also be more explanatory work for the public at the district level. I believe with these measures, the bill will be better implemented and laws will also feature both reason and compassion. I so submit. Thank you.
Mr. Chen Hao-fung. Thank you, Deputy President. I am a member of the Bills Committee on Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024. I've been engaged in district work for more than 20 years, and I think that this legislative amendment exercise has effectively tackled some of the long-standing and thorny issues at the district level, so I support the amendment bill. Let me go through why I support this amendment bill. Water dripping from air conditioners. Well, when water dripping takes place in a back alley, then it's often ignored. But very often at the pedestrian crossings, people are affected by water dripping from ACs of the buildings up there. And that this is often the subject of complaints. Now, I also complained to the FEHD before via a hotline. Usually, FEHD staff work from 7 to 7. And for complaints made outside the office hours, they cannot be tackled. Very often, the households in question would say that they haven't turned on the AC. Now, the bill proposes to extend the hours of entry to 10 p.m. I think it's reasonable. It's not too late as to affect the sleep of residents. However, I think that we should come up with more effective ways of tackling the issues. For older buildings, of course, they may not have a property management company and things may be tricky. For many housing estates, however, they are properly managed, and according to your website, there is a scheme of participation by property management agents in tackling dripping of ACs. I think the government should encourage more property management companies to participate in the scheme, because water dripping from ACs happening in the middle of the night would cause a lot of nuisance. Very often, the residents affected would just approach the caretakers or property management officer, and even when they knock on the doors of the subject household, they will not be entertained. Now, the other question is about water seepage. Usually this happens between the upstairs and downstairs of neighbors, and this is due to a number of reasons, such as leaks of water pipes, leaks, cracks on the exterior walls. And I've been trying to tackle one case for 7 years. Very often, when the moisture content threshold of 35% is not reached, the FEHD staff will close the case. And when there is another complaint, the FEHD will just open another file. And this problem can go on for 7-8 years without a solution. And this is a common scene in local communities. Another major issue is that usually after you've identified the source of water seepage, you don't have the cooperation of the tenant living upstairs. The tenant may need to go to work during office hours, and the FEHD staff cannot gain access to the unit in question. Now, the amendment bill has proposed a time limit for the FEHD officer to gain entry. This is an effective solution. Now, once you can have access to the unit, you can then conduct the dye tray test, and then you'll find the source of water seepage. Nobody can use excuse of having a tenant inside or having just elderly people in the household. So this is one effective solution. The next point is about garbage apartment. Now, I also took up a case of garbage apartment before, and I visited the premises together with the chief superintendent of your department during the era of the swine flu. And I remember this chief superintendent was a lady, and she was fully gowned. And then when we picked up the first item immediately, there was an exodus of vermin and rodents, and very often garbage apartments is a source of rodents and vermin. And if it happens in a private building, it's even trickier. Now, with this legislative amendment, I think that we are making progress. More importantly, like other members have said, the owners or the tenants in question very often need different support. So the FEHD can work with the district office or the care teams. There should be full communication before action is taken. Even after we clear the apartment, if we don't tackle the problem at source, the apartment may be strewn with garbage again, since this tenant may have some mental problems. Now, the fourth point I'd like to make is about shopfront extension. I think Mr. Peter Shiu will be speaking on this as well. We've received so many complaints in the local community. The Deputy Chief Secretary has done a lot in cleaning up streets. I think this is a major achievement. We have had some serious shopfront extension cases before. Well, with the help of the Deputy Chief Secretary, we've seen results. Now, I think that this amendment bill takes the matter further. At the same time, there are concerns that loading and unloading activities may be caught by the law. During the discussion at the Bills Committee, the government has agreed that there should be more communication on how law enforcement will be undertaken. As you know, we have the dried seafood shops in Sheungwan, and especially towards the end of the year, there will be a lot of loading and unloading activities. The time frame proposed is 30 minutes. Of course, these lorries and goods should not cause major obstruction. Where circumstances permit, can the department exercise compassion? Can there be more communication so that economic development will not be affected? I hope that the administration can regularly talk to the trade associations, explain to them the law enforcement approach so that they can work with the government as well, without the business being affected. I thank the administration for moving this amendment bill. I support it. Dr. So Chang-Wing. Deputy President, I support the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024. Public health is something close to the heart of the people. And in recent years, we've seen on TV programs some major complaints against garbage apartments, rodent vermin infestation, smelly back alleys, etc. All these problems have caused our people to suffer. Since the start of this term of government, the efforts have been made to tackle these public hygiene problems. A special group is undertaken by the Deputy Chief Secretary for Administration. We've seen results. However, we have so many long-standing problems that cannot be resolved once and for all. It is opportune that the administration table this amendment bill to review existing legislation and penalty levels. There are specific measures. For example, when warranted, the department can proactively undertake investigation and remove articles that cause obstruction, and also to destroy any vermin, rodents. The FEHD will also be empowered to take law enforcement independently. Through effective law enforcement, we can achieve deterrence. This is a very meaningful bill in improving public health and public hygiene. However, there are still some shortcomings. For example, when it comes to garbage apartments causing nuisance to neighbors, the bill is not effective enough. According to the bill, the definition of litter will be amended, and the period of entry under the notice will be extended as well. However, the bill doesn't really enhance the effectiveness of law enforcement. According to the administration, usually garbage apartments involve elderly tenants or tenants with mental problems. A compassionate approach should be taken. But of course, if the problem is serious enough, resolute action will be taken to clear the apartment. At the same time, the government should ensure that neighbors are given fair treatment since they are law-abiding and that they are the victims of this public nuisance. Government departments should be coordinated, and a special group should be set up comprising district councils and care teams so as to enhance communication and tackle the problem at source. The second shortcoming is this. The bill requests owners, corporations, or property management companies to handle rodent or vermin infestation. If the government steps in, the government will be entitled to recover the expenses incurred. For major housing estates with means, of course, this will not be a major problem. Aged buildings have problems of fragmented ownership and lack of property management. There may be conflicts as a result of the government's attempts to recover expenses from individual owners. The government should provide more support in the form of subsidy and technical guidance to help owners eradicate vermin and rodents. The bill has given the government more powers to take law enforcement action in general. This can help address the issue of public hygiene. However, when it comes to implementation, I hope the administration will take heed of the following. After the passage of the bill, we need to make sure that law enforcement officers can enforce law effectively. The bill empowers the FEHD to take enforcement action against shopfront extension independently. Without the support of the police, FEHD officers may be taunted by the offenders. The government should step up training for frontline officers. A flexible enforcement approach should be taken having regard to the circumstances. My second point is this. We need everyone to chip in to ensure public health. So we need the help of local communities as well. It is important to mount public education and publicity apart from legislative amendment. So after passage of the bill, the government should conduct public education comprehensively to help build a better home for everybody.
Mr. Peter Xu. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Deputy President, I am one of the members of the Bills Committee on the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024. The government is seeking to enhance the environmental hygiene situation from various angles, and I support the move, but there are some areas requiring enhancements in the future as well. Now, as mentioned by my colleagues, officers are only allowed to gain entry between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. to investigate dripping air conditioner or water seepage, so I support extending the hours of entry. Now, besides enhancing penalty for garbage apartments, there are other things to do as well. Now, besides the police, the FEHD is the largest department in the government. You often conduct inspection in various districts. For water dripping from air conditioners, if they take place in a private housing estate, then you can only act on complaints. However, when you're walking on the street, sometimes you can feel that water is dripping on your head. So FEHD staffers can take the initiative to investigate these cases. You should provide guidelines for your colleagues that they need to patrol the area and identify potential water dripping issues. If there are still complaints made to the departments from the public, then you need to take it up to the officers responsible for patrolling the area. There should be penalty for missing air dripping cases. There should be penalty in terms of promotion as well. Now, for water seepage, last year I handled a case of complaint and I referred the case to your colleagues, and it took them half a year to complete the procedure. They conducted dye tests on the toilets and on the bathtub, and after that, the drainage of the toilets, and then the entire house. There are so many steps to be taken. All the dye used in the dye test are not very expensive. You can use several different colors and complete the test in one go. Water seepage is a huge nuisance in Hong Kong. The households upstairs would definitely deny that they are the source of water seepage. So I think the stiffer penalty will help, but you really need to streamline the process of testing and finding the origin of the water seepage, speed is of essence here. Now about garbage apartments. When I was running in the DC election, when I went to Southern Horizon, I had a complaint about garbage apartments in the area. There was simply nothing the complainants could do. Now maybe this is because of the hoarding habits or other mental issues, but it is indeed a very huge nuisance. Now the stiff penalty and the proposal in the bill will help. But do communicate with the property management office as soon as possible so as to address these issues more rapidly. In terms of proliferation of vermin, I really like Mr. Wang, the Assistant Director of Food and Environmental Hygiene. Whenever I call him, he will act promptly. There are mosquito breeding spots and also there are blocked drainage pipe. When I text him, he would act promptly, so I really appreciate his help. Now, if there are no accumulated water, there would be no spots for mosquitoes to breed. Now, if someone in your team tells you that everything is fine and then there's complaint, you really need to hold that person accountable because they are derelicting their duties, they have missed a spot. So it would be a reason for penalizing them. There should be a mechanism that after a patrol, if there are still complaints, the person responsible for the patrol need to write a report to you explaining why they have missed the spot. Now, I don't see Professor Priscilla Leung here about rodents. If you're hard-pressed to address the problem, harness the power from the private market. Just issue a financial incentive for people to catch rodents. Now you are enhancing the penalty for those who are deliberately removing the rodent traps, but I think that would not help. Now for shorefront extension, since Mr. Chuk Wing-hing has started his work, Hong Kong has become much cleaner. Abandoned motorcycles and abandoned articles on the street, all of them have been removed. Now, since the penalty has been increased from $3,000 to $6,000, from $1,500 to $1,680, the results were admirable. Now, according to the government statistics, 90% of the cases have disappeared because no one can afford $6,000 in fine. At the same time, you have to be compassionate about the plight that the business sector is in. You need to strike a balance, like Dr. Starry Lee mentioned. So, Secretary, I think you are doing a good job because you are a compassionate person and you are spreading the message among your team. So for loading and unloading operation, there are particular spots in Hong Kong which are particularly problematic. For the dry seafood street in Shangwan and Yau Ma Tei fruit markets, these are iconic places of Hong Kong. So without affecting public safety, and if situation allows, you need to be less rigid. I don't have to tell you the plight of the sector. The business environment is really hard. Everyone is struggling to stay afloat. Now, to be fair, it is not your doing. There are lots of other reasons. For example, e-commerce and cross-boundary travel. But I think with a good business environment, it will help the sentiment in Hong Kong. Not everyone enjoys seeing monotonous shops in the streets. People like seeing unique things. So if there is a street market, even though it is a bit untidy, people will be attracted to the shops. Now about seizing or confiscating goods, there was a lot of discussion in the Bills Committee. I know the government is going to move a CSA, so I will share my views with you during the CSA stage. How should we approach this and how we can strike a balance between maintaining good business environments and cityscape? Mr. Dennis Leung, Deputy President, I speak in support of the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024. I'm a member of the Bills Committee. This time of the government has attached much importance to environmental hygiene and livelihood issues. They really help members of the public to gain a sense of belonging here. So in the bill, the FEHD and the Director of Food and Environmental Hygiene will be given more power and achieve more deterrence effects. In the first phase, the government has amended the penalty level under the Fixed Penalty Public Cleanliness and Obstruction Ordinance, and also for breaches under the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance. The penalty levels have been raised as well. The amendments have come into place in 2023. Now, this bill seeks to address 5 deep-rooted issues: water seepage in buildings, water dripping from air conditioners, garbage apartments, proliferation of vermin, and shopfront extension or occupation of public places by miscellaneous articles causing obstruction to scavenge operations. There are also unlawful shopfront extension and illegal display of bills or posters. Now, enhancing deterrence is a must to deter breaches of the law. This will improve the living standard of the public. Now, the objectives of the bill is to make Hong Kong more beautiful and livable. It will also help attracting more visitors to our city and boost our economy. Now, the authority, the power given to frontline staff is key. In the past, because of empowerment issues, there were some loopholes. Now, this bill further amends Cap 132. The most important move is to empower the Director of Environmental Hygiene, Food and Environmental Hygiene, and frontline officers with more power to plug the existing loophole and remove the gray area in law enforcement. Now, we want our streets to be free of obstructions. However, for financial reasons, many shop owners are using the pavement for storage of the goods. So this bill will help preventing unlawful shopfront extension. After the passage of the bill, I hope that frontline officers have the guts and courage to enforce the law while exercising compassion. Now, in the past, to show results, FEHD officers would simply slap a notice on the obstructing articles and call it a day. Now, this is a direction of duty. And second, it sends a wrong message to the shops that it is okay, and it's exacerbated the issue. 3, it shows that the senior management in the FEHD has not implemented a standardized law enforcement standard. They shift the burden to the frontline staffers for the sake of their career. Now, I urge the senior management to change the mindset. I understand the considerations taken by the shop owners. However, by putting the products back inside the shop in a tidier manner, it will help attract customers to patronize them. Now, with better management and arrangement, loading and unloading activities can take place in a more orderly manner. It will help protect the properties of the shop owners while leaving the pavements free for pedestrians' enjoyment. Now, there are a lot of visitors taking photographs in Hong Kong. However, sundry items placed on the street would ruin their photos. Now, the FEHD conducts regular operation across the territory to prevent proliferation of vermin and clean the streets to enhance public health. However, miscellaneous articles often obstruct scavenging operations and cleansing operations. Now, according to the existing legislation, a 4-hour notice is required. However, that is too long. A 30-minute notification period will be much more effective for removal operation, and it will allow cleaning workers to complete their job on time. Now, about water dripping from air conditioners and water seepage, I urge the government to make use of technologies to find the source of nuisance expeditiously and prosecute the lawbreakers. Now, about water seepage, currently there is a joint office between the FEHD and the Housing Authority and the Building Department. However, the joint office is only playing by the book, and they are inefficient in finding the source. Now, usually, water seepage is caused by using bathrooms. So usually, water seepage happens during nighttime. But usually, the joint office would conduct the tests for moisture during daytime. The moisture content would have dropped back to the normal range. Now, the problem is you are not targeting the source of the problem. If technology can be deployed to conduct round-the-clock monitoring of moisture content, I believe that a more accurate set of data can be obtained. Now, in the past, the Joint Office has no power to gain entry into suspicious premises. After the passage of the bill, with the longer entry hours, it will facilitate the work of the Joint Office to find the source of water seepage. Deputy President, I hope that the FEHD can step up, can extend the pilot scheme of participation by property management agents in tackling water seepage and tackling dripping of air conditioners in residential buildings. Now, despite the likely passage of the bill, it will only come into effect 3 months after the get settled. I hope that in the 3 months interim period, the FEHD will step up publicity and education for the trade and the public to help the public understand the contents of the bill. Now, the 3-month period is not sufficient. Publicity and education should be made the FEHD's daily work. The same should be done for the frontline officers responsible for law enforcement. Otherwise, there will be a repeat of the problems. So I hope that in the daily work of the FEHD, there should be a combination of law enforcement, publicity, education, and management. Only then can we address the deep-rooted issue of environmental hygiene in Hong Kong. Now, public health and environmental hygiene is not the sole responsibility of the government. To make Hong Kong a clean and healthy city, the burden is on everyone's shoulders. Now let's work together to build a cleaner Hong Kong. I so submit.
Mr. Eng Kong. Thank you, Deputy President. I speak in support of the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024. The bill seeks to give the FEHD more power in relation to handling environmental hygiene issues, say garbage apartments and the environmental hygiene issues in buildings. The Summary Offences Ordinance would have to be invoked in order to handle garbage apartments. This bill, however, gives the power to the FEHD to handle unlawful shopfront extensions. Regarding some offences, the fixed penalties have been enhanced. Anyone refusing entry of premises by public officers, one is liable to a fine of level 2, that is $5,000. And public officers will be allowed to enter premises for investigation between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. in order to cater for the needs of people who have to work during the daytime. Authorized officers do not have to issue a notice before they can take any action against garbage apartments. The bill also empowers FEHD officers to put some devices or equipment, say traps and baits, on the premises in order to prevent any similar problems from happening again. This will also monitor the environmental hygiene situation. I believe this will help to solve the problem of garbage apartments as well as reduce its impact on neighbors. The bill allows the officers to take action without having to issue notices, but there are sufficient checks and balances. Authorized officers cannot cause any structural change to the premises, nor can they remove any large furniture or installations. Regarding some common parts where environmental hygiene issues are seen for a long time, some solutions have been proposed. Notices can be issued to the property management companies to improve the situation. Otherwise, the administration can take action and recover the expenses so incurred from the property management company. At least someone will be responsible for receiving notices. But what about buildings without any owners' corporations? I think we cannot solve the root cause of the problem. This will be at best a band-aid solution. If all owners have to pay the cleansing fees, is that fair to law-abiding owners? I believe we need to strengthen the management capability of managers or owners' corporations of buildings. That is the way to go. Anyone placing any objects to obstruct scavenging operations, the FEHD can request the persons involved to remove the articles in 4 hours. A notice to remove obstruction can be issued and request the owner of the article to remove the obstruction within 30 minutes. In other words, the period of time will be reduced from 4 hours to 30 minutes. During the Bills Committee meetings, I already said there's a lack of loading and unloading areas in Hong Kong. For normal loading and unloading goods activities can they be exempted? In Singapore, there is already an exemption in place. The administration said that this problem could be solved with a code of practice that is to be published in the future. For persons collecting paperboard, compassion should be exercised. 30 minutes is too short. It's not even enough for a simple meal. For laborers, for frontline workers, I hope that the government will exercise discretion and compassion. In relation to shopfront extension, I understand the bill invokes the Summary Offences Ordinances. In the past, FEHD had disputed with hawkers easily. In the Bills Committee meetings, the administration promised that they would provide and strengthen guidelines to be distributed to frontline officers. Such guidelines should be clear in order to avoid any disputes with hawkers or people in the public. Shopfront extension causes environmental hygiene issues. We do need to solve these problems, but can we do so with a human touch? Can we administer verbal warnings? Some hawkers or some shops told me several times of inspections a day make it difficult for them to run their business. If the requirements are too strict, it'd be difficult for businesses to be run. Can discretion and compassion be exercised by the frontline officers? Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024 makes me wonder what a public place means. A public place means places that can be enjoyed by the public, subject to reasonable rules. Quite many public places, like open air area, park, underneath flyovers, they can be accessed by the public, they can be enjoyed by the public. Since skateboarding, ball games are prohibited in parks. Let me give you an example. I'm no expert in skateboarding. I move quite slowly, but then I was actually stopped when I was skateboarding. Now we're outlawing shopfront extension, nor can we have open-air cafes. Should we encourage the provision of space for public enjoyment so that our city will be more vibrant? There is just a very fine difference between abusing and making good use of public places. In the realm of urban planning, we need to redefine public places. I expect that the administration should review the right to public places in order to enhance the sense of belonging and the sense of well-being. Thank you, Deputy President. Ms. Rebecca Chen. Thank you, Deputy President. There are quite many environmental hygiene issues in Hong Kong. Some are very thorny. Quite some members talked about the problems they've been handling. When it comes to handling such issues, it's actually quite difficult in some cases, despite existing laws. Garbage apartments, occupation of public places by miscellaneous articles. These are some examples. Sometimes it takes longer time to address these issues. The fixed penalty for offences have been adjusted. Now we're in phase 2 of the legislative amendments. For common but thorny problems, they have much to do with the implementation details of the policy. I express stakeholders' views to the administration in the hope that they will offer explanations. These legislative amendments are actually quite practical. Focus is put on taking legal law enforcement actions. We aren't making changes just for the sake of it. This is a worth encouragement. But then I'm more concerned about some of the contents, and I hope that the administration will follow up on them. Regarding the removal limit of the removal of obstruction from 4 hours to a period of time specified on notice, the FEHD will specify a period of time no less than 30 minutes. These articles will have to be removed. From 4 hours to 30 minutes. This is the amendment in the bill. This will help expedite the handling of the situation. Some hawkers and stores may be afraid that their operation will be affected. They are afraid that they may be caught by the law inadvertently. I thank the administration for taking on board our views. I emphasized time and again during the Bills Committee meetings that these amendments don't target hawkers. For normal and ordinary loading and unloading activities, the staffers won't be caught by the law. Frontline officers will also assess whether such loading and unloading activities are illegal. The administration must hammer home the message to frontline officers. We need to allay the concerns of hawkers so that they won't live in fear. There are sometimes cases in which miscellaneous articles are placed on the street. In a private housing estate in Mayfu, a lot of complaints were about an old lady who hoarded articles. The old lady even built a cardboard castle. She doesn't live inside the so-called castle. She goes back home in the evening. So what happened is that there is proliferation of vermin in the so-called paperboard castle. The FEHD did conduct a site visit, but for now the problem couldn't be solved. I understand it's not enough to invoke the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance alone. We may have to enlist the help of the Social Welfare Department as well. We shouldn't rely solely on the FEHD. We need cross-departmental collaboration and coordination. In the eyes of Mayfu residents, there is only one government. They won't say it's the problem of the FEHD or the SWD. They would say that it's the problem of the administration. It's the administration that fails to solve the problem. And this will lead to dissatisfaction and anger among people in the area. Regarding the mechanism for claim of obstructing articles, frontline officers are allowed to remove obstruction on the streets. The administration suggested that for perishable articles, say vegetables, seafood, fruits, and so on, the FEHD may remove and dispose of these articles when no one makes any claim. For those who would like to make a claim, an amount will have to be paid to the FEHD. This mechanism is indeed good because you have already taken into account compensation. But before frontline officers remove the obstruction, a notice has already been placed. A period of time has already been given. When no one comes forward to claim the articles, then it could be seen as the person given up on the right to these articles. No compensation should be given to these people. I thank the administration for considering our views and moving a CSA. After the removal of the article, the administration gives the person concerned 48 hours for that person to claim the articles. I'd like to talk about garbage apartments at last. Addressing garbage apartments is indeed no easy task. In an HOS flat, articles were placed in the entrance of the flat, so much so that the doors couldn't even be closed. But the household actually applied pesticide so that there won't be any proliferation of vermin outside the flat. Frontline officers and we visited the flat. And FEHD couldn't witness the scene with a lot of vermin. Neighbors couldn't take any pictures or videos. So, without any fire, any suspected offense, the police or the FSD could not enter the premises without good reason. The existing provisions are that frontline officers couldn't enter the premises just on the grounds of garbage apartments. The bill expands the definition of litter. But then frontline officers couldn't enter premises still. This causes much disturbance to neighbors. I understand very well that this is a very thorny problem. I hope the government will try to solve the problem in phases. Of course, we cannot solve the problem overnight. On the same floor, how many complaints? We need to take into account this factor. In relation to environmental hygiene issues, there are many loopholes to be plugged. I also mentioned water condensate. I hope the administration will continue with its work to improve the regulatory framework in relation to environmental hygiene so we will have a better environment to live in. Thank you.
Mr. Holden Chow. Deputy President, I speak in support of the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024. This bill tackled some long-standing tricky problems, as mentioned by other members. They include garbage apartment, shopfront extension, and also water seepage. I'd like to focus on water seepage, but first of all, on shopfront extension, I'd like to thank the FEHD because, in my experience, for the new town market in Tuen Mun, at one point, shopfront extension was so rampant that there were lots of grievances among the public. But this was some time ago, around 2 years ago. I have seen the government's commitment in tackling the issue. I, along with the FEHD and the police, visited the black spots in a joint operation. And I witnessed FEHD officers being threatened by some vendors when the officers tried to warn them. In fact, you'll find the relevant clips on social media platforms. There are law-abiding shops in the same area. They want the problem to be tackled. They want the black sheep to be eradicated. So effective law enforcement is needed to tackle shopfront extension. And after regular patrols conducted by the police and the FEHD, as well as law enforcement action, now the passageway in the area is smooth. In fact, I just checked last week, and this bill will introduce higher penalties. More powers will be given to the FEHD, and these are tools for better law enforcement. Coming back to water seepage, which is the crux of my speech, the bill empowers FEHD officers or authorized public officers to gain entry into the flat in question for investigation. I think that this is partially an effective solution. In the past, the problem had to do with refusing the public officer's entry. In the end, you had to apply for a warrant in order to gain entry, and that caused a major delay because the officer couldn't even gain entry into the flat for investigation as the first step. Now, with the additional power, the officer will be able to have access to the flat for investigation and for the gathering of evidence. But this is just part of the problem. Very often, for water seepage investigation, tests will be conducted, and yet no case will be substantiated because the moisture content threshold is not met. So going through all the fuss, in the end, the case will be closed. Now, as mentioned by other members, advanced technologies should be deployed in order to trace the source of water seepage so that we have a case. Because only when you have a case, you can proceed with the investigation and stop the matter from getting worse. So if you cannot take the avenue of public nuisance, the only alternative available is to file a civil claim, and that will be a major hurdle for the victims. Even if you lodge a claim at a small claims tribunal, you will only be given restitution. There is no claim for specific performance for the defendant to take a specific action. So you're not tackling the problem at source unless you take the matter to the district court. But then that entails legal costs, and the things will get even more complicated. So public power should be exercised in these circumstances to help the victims. If you want to instigate litigation in a water seepage case, the first step is for you to find a surveyor to prepare a report. So before you even file a claim with the court, you have to fork out several $1,000 to prepare this report. So I think this additional power for public officers to gain entry is the right way forward. The second point is to review the threshold to see how we can open a file for this case. I think this is actually the issue close to the heart of members. So this is my take on the issue. I do hope that water seepage can be tackled effectively because this is an issue troubling a lot of residents in Hong Kong. So I so submit. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Deputy President, I speak in support of the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024. We support law-based governance of the Hong Kong SAR government. We should also improve the laws in Hong Kong so that frontline officers in Hong Kong can fulfill their duties according to the law. This bill relates to a number of issues such as water seepage in buildings, water dripping from air conditioners, garbage apartments, vermin, street obstruction, shop extension, unlawful shopfront extension, and also illegal display of bills and posters. Livelihood matters. Echoing the government's policies, we need to tackle livelihood issues and lift people out of their plight as quickly as possible. So in principle, I support the bill. I believe the amendments proposed in the bill will help tackle some of the long-standing issues in the community, especially in terms of notice to remove articles that may cause obstruction to scavenging operations. The time limit will be shortened from 4 hours to 30 minutes. Now, I've served my constituency for 18 years. I do hope that this new measure can help tackle the problem in Tong Shui Road in North Point. because it's not a morning bazaar. This bazaar goes on until very late in the morning, 9 to 10, and it causes major obstruction to people going to school and to work. What happens is that miscellaneous articles and carts are stored in the back alleys. Under the existing law, items can stay there for 4 hours, and scavengers or hawkers at the bazaar will first move the carts to the crossroads opposite the street, and there are some 80 hand carts there. It's really perplexing why there are so many carts there. They are stored at the back alleys on a prolonged basis, and as a result, there is proliferation of rodent and vermin. Now, the time for removing the items will be shortened from 4 hours to 30 minutes. I hope that this can help address rodent infestation there. The second problem, the second amendment relates to water dripping from air conditioners. Pedestrians waiting to cross the roads are often affected by water dripping from ACs. There are lots of complaints, and the Sunbeam Theatre has now closed. There is a bus stop off the theatre, and this is a major black spot. The situation is quite serious. My next point is about shopfront extension. With efforts made by the government in recent years, we've seen some improvements. But as explained by other members, I don't think the problem is tackled at source. The source of this problem is complex. There are more and more no stopping zones in the streets. Very often, lorries have to unload goods quite far away from the shops. So the shop operators will need to go some distance in order to pick up the goods. And there is a manpower shortage issue for these shops. The other point is that couriers and delivery truck drivers bear the brunt. They often receive penalty tickets. Loading bays are in short supply. So what happens is that these lorries may stop at a particular spot for goods to be unloaded, and then the lorry will be driven away, and then the goods will be left on the side of the road for some time because of shortage of staff. The other scenario is that the driver will stop and park the car at the side of the road and help unload goods. And there is a question as to whether this amounts to loading and unloading of goods only. So the crux of the problem is that we have more and more no stopping zones in streets, and this has a bearing on the businesses, as mentioned. We need to be compassionate. There should be mutual understanding, and for law enforcement officers, they need to have good judgment. When I talk about judgment, I mean whether these officers are familiar with the environment, whether they understand that this is a frequent problem. Another point I'd like to turn to is manpower. We're now in a budget deficit, but even before the deficit surfaced, there has always been a 10% gap between the actual strength and the establishment of the civil service. That means a protracted shortage of manpower. The bill empowers frontline officers to do their duties independently. There is more on their plate, but there is no additional manpower. The situation is dire. A few days ago, I talked to the staff associations of the FEHD as well as the staff association of government municipal services. In fact, along with these associations, we met with the administration, and I understand that after passage of the bill, there will be a 3-month period before the law takes effect, and that the government will work with these frontline associations in drawing up guidelines. I welcome this approach, but at the moment, 13,200 people are outsourced workers. For hawker control officers grade, it has an establishment of 2,171. We have the so-called Mod 1 workmen responsible for lighter scavenging duties. It's quite impossible to deploy manpower all of a sudden to help remove pallets of goods. So there is a manpower deployment issue with the FEHD. If more cases emerge in a single day, there may not be sufficient manpower to support the work. There may be a need to deploy occupational safety and health devices such as forklift trucks, etc. Even other forms of transport may be necessary. So the duties will be heavier and things may get complicated. If we demand our frontline officers to take up extra work, we must make sure that they get sufficient pay. The last point is this. This may not be directly covered by the bill, but we've seen construction sites such as the one near the South Horizons and also the State Theatre building. During major demolition works, there may be large number of rodents scurrying off, affecting nearby housing estates. More efforts should be made to catch and eliminate the rodents. The government should discuss with other departments to make sure that when major redevelopment projects commence, the construction site in question should first eliminate a rodent.
Mr. Ban Chen. Thank you, President. In terms of city management and management of streetscape, for example, handling shopfront extension, this term of the government has achieved a lot. Now, the deep-rooted issue of shopfront extension has been there for many years. This government has coordinated efforts among departments to address the problem, and through legislative amendments, the streets have become much cleaner with no obstruction. Now, in the past, pedestrians need to use the carriageway to walk because of obstruction on the pavements, and that would affect traffic as well. So with these problems addressed, I applaud the government. The government is really showing commitment in the bill. In the past, when miscellaneous articles or goods were placed on the pavement, the entire community would be angry, and there were lots of complaints to myself, the police, and the FEHD. Despite the amount of resources and efforts put into it, addressing the issue, it still persists. So hopefully with the bill, we can change the situation. Now, in the past, when a notice is slapped on the articles, you need to wait 4 hours before you can remove the articles. And when they move the articles a bit back to the shop and then put it back out, there's nothing you can do. So this time, there will be more power given to the authority. But like my other colleagues said, law enforcement is really difficult to reach a balance. Now, a less satisfactory approach is to follow the rules by the word. Even if you put the goods an inch out of your shop, I will charge you. This is a kind of low-tier and sloppy law enforcement. I think that's not the policy intent of the bill, and that's not what we should do in our district management work. We need to be reasonable. Now, the reason is with the authority because obstruction is bad for the community. Legally, the government has the power to enforce the law, but compassion is needed. There's also the issue of equity and fairness. A shop may say that in another district, another shop can do this. Why can't I? So that's why in terms of law enforcement, we need to make some efforts into training the frontline officers. Now, together with Mr. Stephen Ho, I would like to sit down with the director to see how we can ensure that the law enforcement can meet the aspiration of the public. Now, second, for common parts of the building, if the authority takes action to remove or destroy vermin, then the cost can be recovered from the owner's corporations or OCs. But if the building doesn't have an OC, that would be more difficult. So flexibility and discretion is needed here. Now, when there are complaints of rodents, if you catch a rodent, well, the rodent doesn't carry an identity card on it. They might come from outside the building. The owners of the building are also the victims. So you can't say that since the rodent is caught from the common parts of your building, I will charge you. That's difficult to say. That's why discretion is again needed. On the other hand, there are locations which are the shared responsibility of the LCSD, the FEHD, and the building department. Every night, the rodents would be having a party at these locations. So these departments need to sit down and work together how to address the issue and eliminate the infestation. Only then will we have a chance to address these deep-rooted issues. Now, water dripping from air conditioners, indeed, it is a huge nuisance. For all the buildings, they don't have an external drainage pipe for air conditioners. The same applies to SDU tenants. They don't want to cause nuisance. So the government has indeed offered some subsidies for the landlord of SDUs and older building to install a drainage pipe. However, if there is water dripping from air conditioners, the owners can't be found during daytime, and they only become aware of the issue when they are taken to court. So it will not help with the situation even if you fine them, because many owners of properties in older buildings are not in Hong Kong. Some owners don't even know that they still have a properties in these buildings. So I hope the government would exercise flexibility in law enforcement. For very serious cases, the government can simply intervene and ask the building departments to rectify the issue. Would that be feasible? Now, that is not in the bill, but we can continue to explore the direction. The ultimate goal is to address the issues of garbage apartments, infestation of environments, and water dripping from air conditioners. Once again, I thank the government for introducing the bill. President, I so submit I support the bill.
Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I now call upon the Secretary for Environment and Ecology to reply. Then the debate will come to a close. Secretary. President. I'm grateful to Mr. Kitson Yang, Chairman of the Bills Committee, members of the Bills Committee, and the Secretariat of the Council for their efforts in the scrutiny of the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024, the bill for short. I'm also grateful to members who spoke just now. Many members spoke during the second reading debate. They expressed their support for the bill. They also expressed their valuable views. The current term government strives to improve environmental hygiene and street management with a view to building a more livable environment for the public. At the end of 2023, the government increased the fixed penalty for offenses such as littering and shopfront extension. 1 year after the new fixed penalties were imposed, the number of fixed penalty tickets for shopfront extension plunged by 90%. This shows the effectiveness of the new fixed penalties. On the 4th of December 2024, we introduced the bill to the Council and proposed amendments on 3 fronts to strengthen the management of environmental hygiene issues. These proposed amendments were supported by 80% of members of the public in a consultation exercise conducted earlier. First of all, the bill moves amendments to expedite the handling of public health nuisances, including water seepage in buildings and water dripping from air conditioners. In order to speed up investigation, the permissible hours of entering premises for investigation will be extended from the period between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. to the period between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. Non-compliance with the notice of intended entry will be an offense, and offenders will be liable to a maximum penalty of a fine at level 2, that is $5,000. Meanwhile, in order to ensure abatement of the nuisance by owners and households, we propose to increase the penalty for non-compliance with the nuisance notice and nuisance order from a fine of level 3 to level 4, that is $10,000 to $25,000, and from a fine of level 4 to level 5, that is $25,000 to $50,000 respectively. Secondly, the amendments to the bill will enable vermin infestation to be handled more effectively. In order to more clearly appoint who is responsible for handling vermin infestation in common parts to ensure its timely handling, the FEHD may issue a notice of elimination of vermin to the persons responsible for the management of the premises, such as the owner's corporation or the property management company, in accordance with the bill. The level of penalties will be increased from level 2 to level 4, that is $5,000 to $25,000. At present, the FEHD may immediately intervene and address infestation on the premises in serious situations. To motivate households and property management companies to address infestation on their premises, the bill empowers the FEHD to cover expenses incurred in the elimination of vermin so that it will not be deemed a free service. The bill also increases the penalty for interfering with any equipment for eliminating vermin and assessing vermin proliferation. The maximum penalty is a fine of level 2, that is $5,000. Thirdly, the bill seeks to consolidate work that improves cityscape. The bill introduces new provisions in relation to shopfront extension, provides for what constitutes shopfront extension, and empowers the FEHD to remove obstructing articles. The level of penalties stays unchanged. As for the removal of articles causing obstruction to scavenging operations, owners at present are required to remove the articles at within 4 hours, the time will be shortened to 30 minutes. In the meantime, when the FEHD removes illegally displayed bills and posters, they will be empowered to remove display equipment such as pull-up bars altogether for a clean cityscape. In addition, the penalties for the 2 offenses above will be raised from a fine of level 2 to level 3, that is $5,000 to $10,000, and from a fine of level 3 to level 4, that is $10,000 to $25,000. The above-mentioned penalties have not been adjusted since 1996. Therefore, there is a need to make adjustments to ensure a sufficient deterrent effect. Subject to the passage of the bill after the third reading, the bill will be gazetted next Friday, that is the 16th of May. It will come into operation 3 months thereafter, that is the 17th of August. In this period of time, the FEHD will strengthen training of frontline officers and update law enforcement guidelines. At the same time, we will undertake promotion activities within these 3 months to make sure that both the trade and the public keep abreast of the latest law requirements. I'm grateful to the Bills Committee for their detailed scrutiny of the bill. 4 meetings were held, and the public was invited to provide written submissions on the bill. Members expressed support for the overall directions of the bill and put forward a lot of valuable views, such as setting a 48-hour clean period for perishable articles like vegetables seized for the offense of shopfront extension from the viewpoint of the trade, and prescribing a 40-day compliance requirement in respect of a notice of intended entry for the public to better understand the requirements. Members actively put forward their views. This shows the positive interactions between the legislature and the government. We have decided to accept the views of the Bills Committee after careful consideration. I will further expand on them when I move amendments later. In the scrutiny of the bill and in the debate just now, members expressed concern about striking a balance between combating shopfront extension and promoting our economy. Here, I'd like to point out that the new provisions in relation to shopfront extension under the bill will not change the current law enforcement standards and penalties. The new provisions seek to enable the FEHD to handle shopfront extension independently without having to rely on the power of the police force. For instance, the FEHD will be empowered to remove obstructing articles in the event of non-compliance despite a request for the purposes of enhancing law enforcement efficiency and clearing the streets of any obstacles as soon as possible. The new provisions have set out the elements constituting shopfront extension, which are placing or leaving any article in a public place without lawful authority or reasonable excuse and causing or likely to cause obstruction, inconvenience, or danger to the public in connection with the carrying on of a business in a shop. Members expressed concerns over whether the new provisions will affect the loading and unloading of goods by shops. FEHD officers have been provided with clear guidelines and will not interfere with the normal loading and unloading activities. On a different note, members reminded us that in addition to strengthening law enforcement, we must make good use of technologies and enhance cross-departmental collaboration, such as the Property Management Company. We leverage on advanced technologies and work with district offices. We take active part in this infestation work, and we also work to strengthen the role of stakeholders. We will also explore more effective methods to address environmental hygiene issues, especially long-standing problems such as water seepage issues, garbage apartments, as well as scavengers. President, the current term government is committed to providing environmental hygiene to improving environmental hygiene and cityscape to meet public aspirations. We believe that with administrative measures and public education, the bill is critical to the continuous improvement of environmental hygiene, the consolidation of the work carried out so far, and the creation of a more livable environment. I urge members to support the passage of the bill. I so submit. Thank you, President.
Now put the question to you that the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024 be read the second time. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2024. This council now becomes committee of the whole council to consider the public health